Called to order. This special meeting of the Township Council is called to order. In accordance with Section 5, the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, be advised that adequate notice of this special meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Franklin, County of Somerset, was made by posting on the bulletin board at the municipal complex and transmitted to the officially designated newspapers, indicating that this special meeting would take place at the Franklin Township Municipal Complex at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, February 7th, 2017. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Madam Master Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Chase? Here. Councilwoman Francois? Mayor Kramer?
Here.
Councilman Onijaka? Councilman Prasad?
Here.
Councilwoman Robinson? Councilwoman Sherman?
Here.
Councilman Vasanella? Deputy Mayor Wright?
Thank you. We have really one event plus the public discussion on tonight's agenda, and that is a council discussion item number 4, Economic Development Strategic Plan. The Economic Development Committee has been meeting for several months to discuss this, and we have hired a, don't sit down, you're going to be, and we have hired a consultant, and he is here tonight to tell you where we are so far. So I shall turn it over to him. Please introduce yourself, and here we go.
Great. Mayor Kramer, members of the council, Bob, good evening. My name is Todd Poole. I'm with Forward Planning. We are land use economists. And as the mayor mentioned, we were hired several months ago to perform a community market analysis for Franklin Township with a particular focus on 2 districts in Franklin Township, the Commercial Business District, or CB District, as well as the Hamilton Street Business District. And we are at a point where we're maybe a month or so away from finalizing this study. Tonight is really about bringing everybody up to speed on what we've accomplished thus far in terms of the market analysis, what we've analyzed, who we've spoken with, key findings that have been revealed, and basically setting the table for next steps being formulating a strategic plan or an action strategy based on our findings. And so tonight is very high level. Those of you who have been sitting in on the subcommittee know that there is a fuller-bodied report with a lot of rich detail in there, which gives a lot more explanation than I'll be able to give tonight. But this is really a high-level overview of what we've performed to date. So without further ado, I'm going to start. The presentation format that we are using, in case anyone is curious, is referred to as Prezi. And Prezi is a particular application that came out probably in the last 8 or so years. And it's a fresher version of PowerPoint. It makes it a little bit more interesting to use. So you see it moving around. I know my wife will say she can't watch it because it makes her dizzy. So cautioning you up front. So quick, start with a background review and outreach, which is where we started on this. Some of the tasks that were included in our scope of services included improvement to land value analysis, which I'll talk about shortly. We performed case study analyses looking at other kind of business district areas, not only in the region, but really around the country that we thought have application to either the Hamilton Street Business District or the Corporate Business District. So we have case studies in this particular report. We performed interviews. With real estate brokers, some businesses, hoteliers, and obviously we performed interviews with some of the council folks, staff as well. Really, the only focus group that we had, because we did have a difficult time pulling together businesses, was with the hoteliers. They provided some information, and we had some follow-up individually with some of those hotel operators. And then we also performed a online business survey, which I'm going to share some of those results with you tonight. We were able to get a hold of a list of businesses in terms of their contact names and email addresses for either the proprietor or the business operator, and we were able to send out emails on a number of different occasions to get people to respond to that survey, and we'll talk about what those responses are and how many folks responded. First off, the study geographies that we looked at. As I mentioned, all the way on the right-hand side of your screen, we have the two business districts, Hamilton Business District and the Corporate Business District, were obviously our focus areas, so we spent a lot of time looking at those two areas. Franklin Township, of course, looking at the demographics and business and industry and real estate trends associated with Franklin Township, as well as Somerset County and New Jersey. And the reason that we look at these broader geographies is that markets really don't care about political jurisdictions. You know, markets don't stop at your border and then another market, starts at New Brunswick or Piscataway. Markets really look at drive times and how quickly can I get from point A to point B to get to the shopping center or to get from where I work to where I live. And so this is one of the reasons why we look at these geographies. In addition to that, and I'll show you this to you, we use something called drive time analysis, which for our purposes, I think we used a 20-minute drive time from each of our locations to show how big are those market areas within a 20-minute drive time. That is to say, if you were to drive the speed limit on local roads and arterials, here's how far you could get. That represents a primary market area, and a primary market area really reflects about 70% of the people that live, work, and play or shop in that given locale. Not to say that people outside of 20 minutes don't come here to live, work, or eat. It's just to say that the majority of folks are probably within about a 20-minute travel shed from here. And then we have on the far left, the northeast, looking at commercial corridors and office parks, which really represented our case study geographic area. All right, so I mentioned this improvement to land value, or ILV analysis. What is it? ILV allows us as analysts to examine where there might be redevelopment opportunities. Think of it this way: in a healthy real estate market in any community, the improvement that sits on the land should be at least 2 to 3 times the value of the land. So if you own a house, and let's say your property is assessed at $400,000, all right, it is likely that your house is probably valued at 3, and the land on which it sits is valued at 1. I mean, that's a very simplistic example, but it's reflective of generally what the case may be. And it varies from 2 to 1 to 3 to 1, what have you. When we perform this analysis using Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, we're able to map using your tax assessor data and look at different land parcels, residential, commercial, industrial, and are able to examine which areas have relatively low ILV, or improvement to land value. So in other words, if we see that there's a cluster of parcels where the ratio is 1 to 1 or even lower than 1 to 1, that's probably a site that is either at disinvestment or has no investment whatsoever and is probably in need of some redevelopment. Once we look at that on a map and we're able to cluster that together, we can start to say, here are opportunities for redevelopment. So what you have on the screen right now, we're showing you, again, summary. In this case, almost 20 acres of property, industrial parcels, are within Franklin Township that have this low improvement to land value ratio. And that's principally in the corporate business district. What does that mean? It means generally that in that 20-acre area is likely where you are to see redevelopment or adaptive reuse of property. Why is it that you would have low improvement to land value in these areas? Well, and I'll get to this a little bit further in the presentation. In some cases, and as you know, you've got a relatively high office vacancy rate. As the office vacancy continues and as it expands, the value of that particular real estate office, it goes down in value, okay? And as the buildings go down in value, you would naturally see a lowering of that improvement to land value. So that's one of the reasons you would. We also observed, and this is an example, for commercial parcels with low improvement to land value, 24 acres. Again, there are probably buildings that are worth a lot less than they once were, but they're still sitting on the same land that's probably valued at the same amount of money. And so you have this lower ILV. All this is to say is we have or identified relatively large chunks of property that can be redeveloped or repurposed, or at least present that potential. Not to suggest every acre that we've identified can and should be, just that there's a lot of opportunity in terms of what we have identified. I mentioned that we performed case study analyses, which, as our screen says, sheds light on common characteristics and recent trends observed among commercial and office park revitalization efforts nationally. So some of our case studies, in this case, we looked at Germantown Corridor in Mount Airy, PA, the Rhode Island Avenue Northeast in Washington, D.C., and Fulton Hill in Richmond, Virginia. We've got a full write-up on these case studies in our report. Obviously, we're not going to get into the actual write-ups here, just to suggest that we found case studies where we believe there's application for bringing fresh ideas and new concepts, and particularly for the business park. All right. For example, perhaps adding residential alongside or amongst your corporate business buildings, because that seems to be a newer model today. Conventionally, it was unheard of that you would mix corporate real estate or office buildings with residential, right? That's always been the case. Today, and really I think this concept probably started out in California, where they had office parks built, but they were adding housing as well because the workers wanted to be close to where it was they were working and didn't always want to jump into an automobile to get to the office, right? They can jump on a bike, they can walk there, they can run there, jog there, take a trail. I think you're going to see more of that type of repurposing of office parks, particularly as office parks, and again, I'll talk a little bit more about this, as commercial office parks nationally basically are challenged or falling on hard times in terms of vacancy rates. And we have some closer to home case studies involved in this report as well, including in Bridgewater, the New Jersey Center of Excellence, the Bell Works in Homedale Township, which, while that is a much, much larger office commercial base, that too is being revitalized or redeveloped with a lot of residential, maintaining office, but also adding services, retail, and a whole bunch of other things. And as is shown here, in some cases, and this is not always the case, in repurposing, we're trying to create, maybe not a 24-hour live, work, play environment, but at least an 18-hour live, work, play environment. I think you can say you're successful if you can achieve at least that. So the business survey, key findings, and again, we sent out a total of, I think, about 450 of 555 business listings that we received. And the reason it was only 450 is because of the 555 or so, we didn't have email addresses, or at least quality email addresses to send. So we sent out about 450 emails, announcing the survey, explaining why we were doing the survey. And this particular email and follow-up emails went out at least 3 times, to those who, didn't respond the first time, didn't respond the second time. And after about 3 weeks, we have received 51 returned surveys electronically that we were able to then cross-tabulate. That is to look at, the businesses that responded in terms of the industries that they're from, and the size of the business, and then looking at the questions that they responded to and able to get kind of a cross-section of who said what. And again, this detail is in the report. Here's some of the findings. 35% of businesses are considering relocating. A move is either somewhat likely or very likely. 52% of businesses who are considering relocating would prefer to remain in Franklin Township. One indicated interest in the Hamilton Business District, 6 indicated interest in the Commercial Business District, and 8 indicated an interest in somewhere in Franklin Township generally. Questions. We asked them about the benefits and challenges of operating their business here in Franklin Township, and here are some of the responses that we received back. The benefits: access to interstate connectivity, community character and quality was one that came up a bit. The cost of doing business as a benefit, and that's always good to hear from businesses. Access to other businesses in Franklin, which we believe that's very important. You've got a built-in supplier network here. Perhaps not enough businesses know who that supplier might be. That could even be next door. And that's not a Franklin Township thing. I can tell you that in many communities in which we work, there are businesses who are sending their supply money way out of the region when they didn't know that same type of supplier exists right in their own business park. So there's an opportunity to kind of bring folks together, maybe even quarterly, say, do you know who your suppliers are? Strong infrastructure. And this is really talking to the fact that your commercial business district generally has infrastructure in place, right? You are ahead of the game in terms of some other suburban communities who might be wishing to develop what you have, but don't have the infrastructure, the pipes in the ground and the electric and what else that might be required of businesses. So that's positive. Challenges. No great surprise, property taxes. And that's not a surprise. I mean, most businesses, no matter where they are, complain about their property taxes until they move to the next jurisdiction and realize, oh, they're high here. Restrictive building code regulations and or the process of getting through the building permit process. The cost of doing business, which could be associated with the one I've just mentioned, the restrictive building code. So those two are probably related in some respects. The quality of available workers. Again, I will say this. This is not a Franklin Township particular issue. In a lot of places where we work, this is an issue. This is a national issue. And the quality of available workers has to do with not only somebody being numerate, literate, and being able to, take direction, but it's showing up to work on time. It's looking the part that you're ready to work and, not looking slovenly, right? I mean, these all fall into that quality of available workers. And I would, strongly recommend, or it will actually be one of our recommendations, that periodically, whether that's, biannually or annually, that you survey your business community to say, how has the quality of the available workforce changed for you, right? There, you have an ability to take an intervention. That intervention, quite honestly, needs to start at the high school level, junior high, right? Because if it starts there, then you don't have to worry about these issues by the time they get out of high school or even out of college. They should be, reminded at that level, like, this is how you comport yourself when you show up to get a job, when you're at the job, and so forth. Maybe my kids can learn something from that. Access to public transit. This is a big one. The fact that there is limited public transit in Franklin Township generally, and in particular in your business district. Now, obviously, the Hamilton Business District is better served than anywhere, and for obvious reasons. It's on an arterial that has the type of commercial activity where you would expect to have at least bus service. But even that should probably be improved given the fact that you are seeing a lot of investment, private investment taking place there, and it's only going to add more people and more people who would probably like to take public transit as opposed to own their own vehicle. The public transit access in your commercial business district is probably inadequate if we're talking about repurposing property, if we're talking about adding the types of uses that we think could make sense there, including residential and other commercial activity. Right now, if you don't have a car and you're somewhere in the business park, you're probably out of luck until somebody comes to pick you up. And 80% of business owners indicated a desire for more sit-down, casual, fine dining restaurants. We clearly recognize that in the last couple of years, you've added some restaurants, some eateries in the general area, but not in the business park proper, which is there's a difference. And I would also say that I think implicitly what these business owners, and probably if we ask the employees, what they're saying is, no. We want something that we can walk to, or at least if I do jump in my car, I'm there in 2 minutes. We can debate, how necessary that is or not, but I think there's no question that the more amenitized your corporate business park becomes, the more attractive it becomes for other types of investment. I mentioned that we performed a series of interviews, and on your screen we list the folks that we've spoken to generally. And it should be noted that when we perform interviews, we do so letting our interviewee know that it is without attribution to what they say, or without attribution to who they are, I should say. And that is to allow for the interviews to be candid, and for people to really share with us, what they have to say without fear of, something coming back. So while we list in general, the types of folks we spoke to, we won't tell you who said what. So now let's talk about what they said. There is demand for medical office in general space, or medical office in general. The office space that you currently have in your corporate business park is typical professional office space. Plain vanilla, that's what it's been. And there was a time when that's what you needed and it served everybody's purpose. Today, and again, this is not a Franklin Township thing, is nationally the niche within office that is growing, and it really is the only niche in office that's growing, is medical office, or what we like affectionately referred to as doc in a box. It is medical practitioners, allied health professionals, outpatient services, radiation, anything you can think of where I don't need to stay overnight. That's what's growing, and growing rapidly. And it was happening anyway, but the Affordable Care Act kind of accelerated it. And what that means is that, and as our population ages, and every day another 10,000 people turn 65. So as we continue to age as a population, and I will tell you that in this area, in this greater Franklin Township area, the population is aging too. There will be greater and greater demand for medical office space. Now, what does that mean? Some of this space that will be required could probably fit nicely into some vacant space that you currently have today. But I will also tell you that medical office space, like retail, likes to be right on a major thoroughfare, right on, like you can see it, I know where I got to park, right? It's different from professional office space where you can be tucked away behind trees in a nice bucolic, setting, and not so with medical office space. They want to be more accessible, they want to be seen. And so having said that, some of this office space won't be appropriate, or maybe the better way to say it is they won't find some of your existing office space in the business park appropriate for their needs. There is a need to build, and again, these are responses that we received from our interviews. There's a need to build more flex space with loading docks and drive-in space. Flex, for those of you who are not familiar, is kind of a hybrid between office and light industrial or warehouse space. So a classic flex space building could be 50,000 square feet, of which 10,000 is office. Right, and it's not corporate office, it's kind of the office space used by that company, right, but they've got office employees and other administrative functions happening there. The rest of it, or the back of the house, is open, 30-foot clear ceiling heights, and stuff is stacked, and there's forklifts driving around. I will say that, and based on our study, of the demand that you have in your corporate business park, there's probably no stronger demand than for flex office and light industrial generally, right? You could probably build more of that all day long and be fine. The problem is you don't have enough available land to build that all day long, or more importantly, where you'd like to build it today sits a corporate office building that's probably sucking wind in terms of vacancy, and it's too expensive for the person who would build light industrial to go in there and acquire an office building that costs a certain amount per square foot and put up a light industrial building in which they can rent for something far less than what they would buy for. So there's this economic gap today, all right? And while that gap is closing, it probably won't close enough anytime soon. So we've got a little bit of a mismatch in terms of the land uses that are happening. There could be opportunity, however, for some of those buildings to be repurposed, again, depending on how motivated the owner of an office building is to sell to a light industrial user. But again, that's going to be a challenge. Companies coming to Franklin are back office and IT based. All right, what brokers told us are the companies that find Franklin Township attractive in our business park or your business park attractive are those who have back office. Back office are, the operations that support, different corporations. So back office could be a call center, right? You got 100 people in there taking orders for XYZ products or services. It could be a data back office where they've got servers and people, doing the IT thing. And then there's just general IT, people coming there who are consultants and or are working as a third-party contractor for another company who are servicing clients somewhere else. Because of those types of operations, we also know, and we heard this from both the hotels as well as from the brokers, that there is a large contingent of temporary employees who come to your business park who are, in many cases, are coming from foreign countries, from India, from Pakistan, from Europe, who are coming here, receiving training, IT or otherwise, and then are placed somewhere else. Now, that period of time in which they're trained could be anywhere from 4 to 6 months before they're, sent somewhere else. As you might expect, they need somewhere to live. Putting them up in one of your mini hotels isn't always the answer because it's a lot more expensive, and it's also somewhat confining. And as you can imagine, being in a hotel room for 6 months gets a little old fast. So what we heard, and we've heard this from more than one of the brokers who deal with these companies, is that they would like to see some type of extended stay or even some type of almost dormitory type facility in the business park. Okay, and again, thinking in terms of recycling buildings, this could be a repurposed office building, right, which are suitable to do that. Yes, some retrofitting would take place, but if the zoning were to permit that, and I think that's really all we're talking about, that could be a adaptive reuse for some of these office buildings that are currently underutilized. Zoning is an issue. We heard from some of the brokers that the permitting process should be made much easier. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm currently working on a separate analysis that is looking exactly at that issue. So I won't comment on it right now because I have just too little information to say either way. But clearly that is, that has been mentioned, and we are pursuing, what those issues are. Franklin Township should better amenitize the existing office park so workers don't have to travel far during lunch or on their breaks. We talked about this, or I mentioned this, that there are probably too few amenities to make your business park attractive to a company or companies who would locate here. And the classic example is in today's market, the corporations are hiring millennials, those who have been born between 1982 and 2000. And let's say these folks are between 25 and 34 right now. These are the types of folks who are used to or are definitely demanding walking outside their building into a Starbucks or walking outside their building and 50 feet later they're at a pizza parlor or some kind of restaurant, or it's after work and they can 2 blocks away there's the corner pub, right? That's not what you have in the business park, certainly, and it wasn't built that way, understandably. But if we're talking about pulling those types of companies here to the business park, those are the types of amenities that would necessarily, at least in part, have to be there to make that attractive. And it's not to say that if you don't have that, you're not getting any other business investment. No, I'm not saying that. Just to say that the types of businesses that will find that business park attractive are going to be very selective and far and few in between. And then finally, corporate business and and I should say, has declined substantially. Hotel market is supposed to remain flat over the next 3 years. What we found is that you're probably over-hoteled, although there's no hotel operator who's going to stand up and say, yep, we'll leave. More to the point, they'll probably tell you, no, the other guy should leave so we can do better. I'll be the first to tell you, I don't quite get why you have so many hotels and why more keep wanting to open. Because at least from what we can tell, the occupancy rates at these hotels would not suggest that you should have as many as you do. And as a matter of fact, what they suggest is that there's got to be a couple of them, hanging on for dear life. The other thing is this, is that it made sense that you had as many hotels as you have maybe 20 years ago when your office park was fuller, right? Because generally the hotels that you have are driven by business, right, and business travelers. The fact that you've seen a lot of your corporate business buildings increase their vacancy, I would think there's a strong correlation with a decrease in occupancy at your hotels. But again, you would never know that just from driving around. You would think that they're doing okay, given that there's so many. So that, I'll say this, there is going to be a day of reckoning for one or more of those hotels. And when that day of reckoning comes, you have yet another property that will need to be repurposed. Could present an opportunity, could present a challenge, or both. But the day of reckoning will come. All right, so that's the kind of our qualitative side of what we did. The interviews, the focus groups, the surveys. This is a little bit of the more quantitative, hard-level analysis that we performed. And when we perform market analyses, it really consists of 3 components. It starts off with socioeconomic or demographic analysis. People and households drive markets, so that's always where we start. We then move on to labor and industry cluster analysis. Labor and industry, they bid for stuff too, including people for workers. And they also bid for office space and commercial space. So we want to understand what's happening in the labor market locally and regionally. And then finally, we look at real estate supply demand after we've looked at these other particular attributes or characteristics of your locality and region. And real estate supply demand, we're looking at just that, how much supply of housing, of different types, multifamily rento, condos, townhouses, single family, are in your market. How much retail space is in your market, industrial, office. And then we look at the demand side, and we do those calculations to say, do you have too much or too little of those different types of office or different types of land use spaces, and then we make a determination and identify that for you. Now, again, the detail on the demographics and the labor and industry are in your report. I'm focusing here on the real estate side. As I mentioned, new hotel investment is not likely warranted. We did identify a demand of between 730 and almost 1,600 multifamily units by 2026. And what that means is that if no new units were to be developed or delivered to the marketplace here in Franklin, and based on what we saw for the primary market area, what could be captured here, you could have enough demand to build by 2026, so a little under 10 years from now, another 730 units at a 5% capture to as many as almost 1,600 units at a 10% capture rate. Now, again, all that depends on developers who may come to your community to build stuff. If they come to your community over the next 10 years and build, upwards of 700 units, which is, quite likely, none of this will materialize. It's just to say you've got that kind of demand in the area, people wanting to live here, new households forming, pent up worker demand. I mean, all that goes into those numbers. We identify, every year new households form. Kid goes off to college, kid gets a degree, comes back, lives with their parents till he figures out, he or she figures out how to get a job. They get a job locally, and guess what? They need to move out, whether they like to or not, but they will get their own household, and that's a new household. Most likely it's going to be an apartment. There you go. There's one of those 730, and that happens over and over again. We also, again, identify that there's pent-up worker demand. We use a factor that says for every 100 people that work in your local area but live somewhere else outside of that 20-minute drive time, that primary market area, we say between 3 and 5 of that 100 would gladly trade that commute to live somewhere closer to where they work, for cost reasons, for time reasons, for both. That adds to this number. We wear out housing because housing wears out, okay? On an annual basis, about 1% of the housing stock nationally, it needs to either be substantially rehabilitated or knocked down and start from new, right? That factors in. So these are some of the numbers that, come into the math of how we get to 730 and 15. Mentioned flex and medical office space are the two segments most in demand. Investment in light industrial development appears to be warranted. Again, it's a question of where we can build more of it, bless you. Do the economics work out based on existing office properties, perhaps subdividing property they're not using, right? There's another way. Maybe we don't, take the building down, but maybe it's a question of, here's an office property sitting on 50 acres of land or 40 acres of land. They could gladly shave off 10 of those acres where you could create some flex office space, perhaps. And then, of course, we identified that, there is demand for new investment in restaurants and specialty retail, particularly along the Hamilton Business District. Okay, that your HBD is becoming hot, and my recommendation is don't get in the way. There's no real need to come up with new regulations as far as we can tell. I think that market has already discovered itself, and things are happening. It is unlike your corporate business district, which is going to need some new regulations. It's going to need some help because it's more challenging for the reasons that I've already cited. So here's a little bit of the demographics. Regional household formation is dominated by non-family households. And non-family households, just so everyone is clear, the census identifies two types of households. There's family and non-family. A family household is comprised of 2 or more people who are related by birth, marriage, blood in some way, uncle and, niece, adoption. They're related in some way. That's a family household. Family households are typically larger households. In America today, a family household is generally above 3 people in the housing unit. A non-family household is described as 1 or more persons, and if it's more than 1 person, they are unrelated in any of those ways I've just mentioned. All right. So think of 4 college kids sharing a house they're renting, or an apartment, or a widower or a widow who's living in a unit. That's now a non-family household. Non-family households, locally, regionally, nationally, are the fastest growing segment of households in America, and it has been the case for the past 10 plus years. The so what question. So what? The so what question is, it is one of the reasons why you are seeing so much demand for multifamily rental and more increasing demand for smaller housing units, which I'll also say that you may be petitioned very soon for tiny housing and this whole tiny housing movement, which is not a bad thing. And tiny housing, by the way, just because it's tiny doesn't mean it's cheap. There are very expensive tiny houses and kind of luxury tiny houses. But what it does is it offers people who don't want the maintenance and expense of, the 3,000 square foot, 4-bedroom, $15,000 taxed house, right? Tiny housing also does this to the extent that it allows, let's say, residents whose children have left their domicile and, again, don't want that larger housing unit. They can downsize, okay, have their own place, a smaller housing unit, and guess what? They got a lot more discretionary income to spend in your community. And I like to say it's better to have someone who is not house rich and cash poor, because that does nothing for your local retail businesses, right? You want the flip side of that, because if they're not spending all that money on their house, it's getting spent in your community ultimately. Strong incomes and spending. This is a relatively affluent area that you have here. You got affluent sections of your community, and you certainly are in an area that has affluence generally. You are part of the Wealth Belt, being in Somerset County. The Wealth Belt, if you didn't know, includes Somerset, Hunterdon, and Middlesex. I believe that's correct. Yes. And they call it the Wealth Belt because of the high household incomes nationally, and so that's something to take advantage of. And getting back to the types of businesses, retailers, and so forth, some of which you're getting, and some of which you may not get, but it's something you can leverage off of to attract other retailers. We've identified that you've got well-designed, located, and priced rental housing, and that should also be a good business draw. Businesses, when they're corporate site locators, when they're looking to locate a company, particularly with more than 100 employees, they want to know: do you have quality housing stock? Where is that stock? Is it affordable? That's important that you have it, but again, to develop more is not a bad thing. In terms of industries, many area workers are employed in relatively well-paid industries such as professional, scientific, and technical services. What does that include? Well, folks like me, consultants, accountants, engineers, lawyers, entrepreneurs. Those are folks who fall into that particular category. Township workers and county workers are also located in your particular or in your town. Healthcare and social assistance sector is the fastest growing industry locally, regionally, nationally. And as this graphic shows you, it's projected to add over 5,000 jobs by 2025 in the county. What does that mean? The healthcare sector creates a lot of different jobs and occupations, and they span different income levels. I will tell you that while there are a lot of jobs, a lot of those jobs are low to mid-wage jobs. And again, the so what question. The so what question is, these are the same folks who are going to be looking for workforce housing. We can call it affordable housing, which it is. Someone once reminded me that the President of the United States lives in affordable housing or subsidized housing. So we all need affordable housing, no matter how wealthy one might be. But it is true that you need a certain inventory of workforce housing. That too could make a lot of sense in your corporate business district, okay? Combined or partnered with transit, right? Not just isolating people out, here you go, because those same people who need the workforce housing, guess what? They probably are struggling to afford the car that they own. So, but I will tell you that could be a very big catalyst for the corporate business district, because if you put enough workforce housing out there and hit that critical mass, guess what? Retail follows rooftops. Now retailers want to be close to that critical mass of where people live. And we talked about, you've got a great potential to attract local area and regional companies looking for knowledge workers. The fact that you are in the shadow of Rutgers University is not lost on corporations in the region. So again, you want to leverage that in your marketing materials and perhaps, continue to make sure that linkage remains with your local companies who are knowledge based. entrepreneurial talent may lead yet to more private business development. There are too many communities who like to swing for the fences when they're trying to recruit. They're spending $50,000 to $100,000 in these national business magazines and newspapers, and they're hiring consultants to go scour the state and bring in these big. I will tell you, you have a wealth of entrepreneurs right now in Franklin Township today. How do I know that? I know that because of the educational attainment level that we've identified, which is high, the affluence in terms of household wealth, the fact that you've got a lot of people who own their housing units. The fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in America, as identified by the Kauffman Foundation, which studies this and puts out this report annually, has identified that people 50 years of age and older represent the fastest and the largest segment of entrepreneurs in America, right? And it makes sense because these are generally people who've had a career, or have had a significant career, and are looking to do something different. A number of these folks have college degrees. They've got equity in their houses, which allows them to start a business, because God knows a bank is not lending them money to start that business. And many of them want to start a business that's lifestyle oriented as opposed to growth oriented. And the difference is, if I start a business that's growth oriented, I'm looking to become the next Bill Gates and have a bazillion people work for me. If it's a lifestyle business, it might just be me, or maybe I hire a couple of people and that's it. I want to keep it really low maintenance, and I also want to keep it close to where I live. All right, and so an implication here is that let's make sure that we have zoning in place that allows for home businesses, or for businesses that are located next to residential areas where it makes sense. Again, this is, I think, where we come back to your corporate business park, as well as making sure that that the right infrastructure is in place, such as fiber optics and all the other high-tech stuff that needs to be there. There's an anticipated shedding of workers with manufacturing skill sets that, as manufacturers become more automated, there are folks who are going to be displaced. How do we deal with those folks? Well, again, some of these might be candidates to start their own business, right, and do something with their skill sets. In other cases, they may need to be retrained. And some of them will find jobs that are already in your business park. So we want to keep that in mind. We want to make sure that you also stay in contact with your workforce investment board at the county level to make sure that they're in steady contact with these businesses who might be laying people off. I mentioned that manufacturing is declining, at least in terms of people. There are manufacturing subsectors that are experiencing growth, and these are more high-tech specialty manufacturers, some of which I know you have in your business park. You want to have conversations with these businesses on a quarterly or semi-annual basis to understand what are their needs, training needs, what are their needs in terms of perhaps expansion. Are there suppliers that they believe would make a nice fit in your business park, right? Yes, manufacturing generally is shedding jobs around the country because it's becoming more automated. However, doesn't mean that you can't have some of that automated manufacturing in your particular area. And I would say that businesses that are like to cluster, right? So the more of those types of businesses you might get, the more of a magnet they could become to attract other like businesses and or suppliers. And again, the professional, scientific, and technical services sector, you have a competitive advantage. The location quotient of 1.25 just means that relative to the state of New Jersey, you have, and all else being equal, you have a 125% greater labor sector in that industry relative to what the state has. That's positive. However, these firms are clustered in Bridgewater, Burnsville, North Plainfield, and Watchung. Not to say that you can't steal some of these firms, and the way that you would be stealing them is through real estate value. A cheaper real estate market here relative to those places could be the way that you bring some of that talent and investment here. So finally, and this is pretty much our last phase and where we find ourselves today in terms of performing this analysis, is we're analyzing the limitations and the alternatives and the opportunities that we've just identified, and starting to think about how do we turn this into recommendations for maximizing economic opportunity. How do we develop a targeted business strategy? We know generally the industries that you should be targeting. Now, which businesses or business opportunities are there, based on those industries, and how do we couch that in terms of a recommendation and an actionable strategy? Who does what, when does it happen, how much money does it take, and who is responsible, staff level, elected level, or even outside of the municipality. Identifying the redevelopment sites is part of our charge. Where does that happen in the park precisely? Financial feasibility analysis. It's one thing to say we'd like to have this. It's another thing to say, is it financially viable? Developers and business interests want to know, that's nice that you want it, but I can't make a return or a risk appropriate return on doing what it is that, is market receptive. We're going to test that out when we do some financial modeling. And then ultimately, all of this will roll up into a final business development and strategic recommendations segment of our report, which will then be presented with the overall report, and that will be the end of our study. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Everyone here has been on the Economic Development Committee except Mr. Prasad, so I will defer to him first if he has a question.
It's interesting, but I mean, to see what your recommendations would be for specifically for the Davidson area. Hamilton, I think we're doing pretty well, but Davidson is a problem, and any creative solutions, we'd love to hear about them.
That's where, Councilman, that's where we're headed next, is figuring out what those creative solutions are going to be.
Right. So till then, stating the problem, the obvious.
Right. Well, we're stating the problem, but also I think what we've done here is highlight where you've got some opportunities. I think the easier part was stating what the problems are, because most of us in this room have seen it to one degree or another. But I think what we've done thus far is say there's some opportunities. They're not all easy, and they don't all happen at once. Part of what we're going to hand to you, and as a policy board, you are going to decide what's most important to us and what happens first based on what we want as a governing body. So I will be presenting you with that. I mean, I'll have my preferences and certainly recommendations, but ultimately it's your call.
There are a few people who want to build high-end hotels here, and based on what you just told us, they shouldn't be. That's just.
I'll be honest with you, and I study markets all over the country, and I've certainly done a few hotel analyses. There's nothing that jumps out at me that says you need one more hotel, whether it's luxury or otherwise. But budget, mid-tier, luxury, I don't see why there's a need for one here, for the simple reason there's nothing additional in the Franklin Township area that warrants putting yet another hotel. Now, tomorrow, and I'm being, kind of facetious here, but if you were to drop a major stadium, where the Yankees played, okay, or, something else where there are going to be tens of thousands of people here on a weekly basis, fine. But really, there's no justification to bring in yet one more hotel when the hotels that are here presently, in my opinion, a number of them are struggling from an occupancy standpoint.
Keep coming.
Councilwoman Sherman.
Thank you. Transportation obviously is vital. we've talked about it, we've looked at opportunities. How do you get transportation to be interested in you when there's nothing for them to lure them here? How do you make that happen? You can't do it. It's like a chicken or the egg. Which comes first?
Right. So, Councilman, the transportation that we're talking about, at least initially, is not going to be public transit because you're right. First of all, public transit is, for all intents and purposes, broke no matter where you go.
Right.
And I'm talking about New Jersey Transit generally. The type of public transit that would have to happen here is going to be paid for privately, maybe through a consortium of businesses, okay, to make it work, and that will happen probably as you get more investment in terms of housing and other businesses that bring a critical mass of people to say, okay, we now have that. Now let's put in place a small, even a pilot, type transportation system. It's like a shuttle van or of sorts, right? That gets you from here to the train station in New Brunswick, from here to shopping centers elsewhere, but to strategic locations until it builds on itself, right? And the way that transit works, because we do work actually for New Jersey Transit, is they will go where there is a critical mass that can ring their fare box, right? It is all about the fare box.
Of
if
course.
you can prove to them,
it's all
right. Right now, you're not there yet, which means no, they're not coming. However, doesn't mean you can't have transportation of some sort. It's just going to mean that private sector is going to have to step up to the table, which does benefit them. Quite honestly, if I'm an employer that's going to bring in, a lot of young people who don't necessarily want to have a car or who are more Uber savvy than us, I'll be more than happy to add a transit or a private transportation system, to an extent, and maybe share that with someone else.
Have you seen that happen?
It's happening more in cities than it is in suburbs, but I imagine suburbs who are now reinventing their office parks are now considering that as well as part of the package.
I can't see any other way. Certainly, as you say, we're not going to bring money to the larger New Jersey Transit. You have to start small. So, all right, it's a challenge, but we have to do it, I guess, at some point. It has to work.
It has to work, and again, I think it's it's a partnership. You sit at the table with those businesses who are going to most benefit from it, and it makes most sense to them, and you figure out, okay, how do we make this work? I will tell you, in some cases, you might be able to get a New Jersey Transit to donate the vehicle, but not the driver. And of course, in today's day and age, in another few years, you might not need the driver. So there you go. There's a cost savings.
So I have another. I haven't quite formulated in my head, but Hamilton Street is a very new phenomenon. It was not there 2 years ago. Am I correct? I'm not sure. I think about 2 years ago we were still struggling.
Right. No, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, what we can do, and suddenly the process changed. The Hamilton Street Business Board, I forgot what they're called. We put one of our own employees in charge, and suddenly new ideas started happening, and it's sort of exploding. And was there a pent-up need for this? We always saw it as, why isn't New Brunswick moving into Franklin Township? Why aren't students living, where we're very close, and yet they keep going up instead of coming out to us.
Which is expensive.
Yeah,
to go up.
yeah.
Right.
So we don't really know. I don't know that we anticipated that this was going to happen. I would like to think that it was the skill of our people that brought this all together.
Anticipated it.
I was going to say, I think your regulatory policies that were put forth by staff who recognized, and probably through conversations with prospective investors, which is the way it's supposed to work, right? You put two heads together, and one has the ability to help on this side, and the other one says, I'll bring the money to the table, and boom.
Right.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work. And I
And
think
timing has to all come together.
and the market
And it
has
was
to
the
be
right
there.
time.
And
It was the
market has
right
to be
time
there.
So can we expect that kind of serendipity to work for Davidson? Yeah, is
That's
it?
a longer-term play. I'll give you what I think is probably the best answer is that the revitalization of your business park in its entirety, such that one day you can say, it's working. I mean, the thing is working no matter where you go. 20 to 25 years. 20 to 25 years from now, you'll be able to say it. Short of that, it's how long it's going to take. Because it's a slow process. You will have to have incentives in place for those first in, right? As you know, I used to work in the public sector for a dozen years. I started my career in New Brunswick as economic development, assistant director. What I found in my X number of years doing this work is there's too many communities who throw good incentives at bad deals. And they don't strategically use incentives. And incentives are not always money or even tax abatements. Sometimes incentives are regulatory with increasing density or allowing something to be built where otherwise was not permitted, but it's, doesn't affect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So what I'm saying is that to make the business district, the commercial or corporate business district work, is the upfront incentives to those who come in first and are willing to risk, because they're the ones making the bigger risk, as opposed to the guy who comes in 10, 15 years from now is like, oh, it's already happening. That's where you have to decide to also put up whatever it is you're going to be risking, regulatory, tax abatements, or otherwise. That's necessary. When you prime the pump like that and you hit a critical mass, and I have always said, the first person in gets the best deal. The next person in gets something less than the best deal. The third person in something less than that, and so forth. That's the way incentives should work generally. And so part of this is also structuring your policies, incentives, everything else to benefit those who are willing to risk, to be the first ones to risk. And then, as things progress, you can pull back on whatever you think you need to pull back on. But I think initially that's what it's going to take.
Well, personally, that was very helpful to me. I mean, it was not in my thinking 20, 25 years. I wanted another Hamilton Street.
The thing about Hamilton Street in scale is so much smaller, and it's easy, right? It's like you can see it; it's all there. You already have the right things in place right now, and it's just an easier development play. And even that, it's going to take another 5 or so years to really fully realize its total potential. The business park, the big thing. It's going to take time.
Yeah. I guess there's certain low-hanging fruit that we can probably pick very quickly.
Yes.
Like I don't know what zoning we need for home businesses, but we should probably do that relatively quickly. The Hamilton Street, I'm not sure what else, but then we have to see and be prepared for the fact that the rest of it is going to be a process that's going to take. It's not going to take a couple of years. It's going to take a bit of time.
When we produce our final recommendations, we have kind of an action section which lays out not only the what to do, but the timing in which to get it done, the goals and objectives of what it is we've identified for you to do, so you know how to measure whether you're achieving it. And so we'll, for example, we'll say this needs to be accomplished in the next 3 to 5 years, midterm goal. Long-term goal, the next 6 to 8 years, right? And it's not to say when we lay this out like 8 years comes and goes, okay, we're done. It's just to say, okay, now let's do it again, and to assess what has transpired, right? Because you're going to achieve some of this, you're not going to achieve other things, and also the market will change, and so this is a living plan or strategy. It is not to be static. So when we hand this to you, it's not to say, okay, Todd said do this, and then once,
It doesn't happen magically.
It doesn't happen magically, and it should always be thought of as we can add to it, we can make it better as time goes on and as we all know new information.
I think the piece for the council, and I'm sure they are aware of it, and the public to recognize that this is a project for the long haul. It doesn't come for free. We have to have staffing for this. We have to have the incentives for this. We can't be weak-kneed about it. We need to be in it for the long run and make sure that We don't just do a quick flash in the pan and then it's over, because we'll have nothing under the circumstances.
And I would add this too. There's an opportunity cost to doing nothing, right? There will be some communities, a community, let's say similar to Franklin Township, who will hear this, and what they'll focus on is, oh, this is going to cost us X, Y, and Z, and we got to go through all this trouble to change zoning. And so they'll do nothing. And I will tell you that 5-10 years from now, I can project today what that community will look like. I can tell you what your tax base will look like. I can tell you a bunch of things, and there is the opportunity cost, right? Because you said, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to spend this money. I'll tell you that here's what you could look like if you did spend that money, and I will tell you that you'll be this much further ahead having done it today as opposed to not done it, right? That's the choice that certain communities make who say, you know what, we're not doing anything. So there's a cost to not doing anything.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Francois.
I like all the opportunities that you presented to us in terms of the corporate business area. In particular, I like the repurposing the flex office space and the need for amenities for millennials,
Yes.
and also the medical office space. Those were things that really just grabbed out at me. I'm hopeful that in your recommendations, when you go about doing them, that you kind of give us a good idea and sense of how to go about doing some of that. And the other question that I had, which kind of, it's just a question. You mentioned when you did the surveys that some of the businesses had said that there was a cost of doing business in Franklin Township. What does that mean?
It depends on who you talk to. You ask. But, nothing nefarious, nothing under the table cost of doing business. It's just, for some business owners, they mint it in a way that, you know what, this is more trouble than it should be. If you phrase it to them, what do you mean by cost? Or I've got to jump through more hoops than I believe I should have to jump through, right? And like I said, I think the cost of doing business, and part of that's probably also what they pay in taxes or regulations. I will also tell you that there are probably some business owners who are ascribing cost or hardship that really doesn't apply to Franklin Township, but they think it does because that's where they feel the pain, but I would say generally they're probably talking about seeking permission to do something and feeling as though, rightly or wrongly, that it shouldn't cost this much, shouldn't take this long, and, why am I here? Of course, they don't always have anything to compare it against, particularly those who've been here a long time. So, you've got to take it in context, and of course, the analysis that I'm now working on is going to help me explore deeply that context, because part of that analysis is not only looking at your process of how businesses and developers go through the process of getting something developed and investment made. We're going to be looking at other communities nearby as well as statewide of similar size and character to say, how does it work there? Does it work any better? Is it worse? What are the processes?
And you may be recommending some kind of incentive program along with that, perhaps, or maybe a process change or staff change and things like that.
For that study, the recommendations will ultimately be about how can you improve your system based on what we've learned, best practices, as well as, is there something you can cut out of your step-by-step process that does not run afoul of state regulation or even your own policies that, it doesn't impact the health, safety, and welfare of your community.
Well, when do you think this whole study will be wrapped up and your recommendations will be?
Which study? This one?
Both, actually, both.
This one, where are we? I'm hoping to have this one wrapped up by no later than the end of March.
Good.
The one we've really just kicked off probably will not be completed until summer. which is what we scoped it to be. And the reason that it's going to take that long is because a lot of that study is about interviewing people, because that's really where we're going to find out, what's going on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Looking
Councilman-
forward to your results.
Okay.
Councilman Chase. Your mic on?
I was interested in what you said about the flex buildings, and I know there is a market out there because in my time on the planning board, I've seen innumerable applications for such, but half of them don't get built, and I just wonder why. I mean, there's a particular property that we on the planning board have approved site plans 4 times, but somehow they never build it. I think it's happening now, but yeah, Vincent and Mark are looking at each other because I know exactly which one I mean.
There's shovels in the ground. It's
Yeah.
being built now.
But there's other properties, and yeah, we just at the Environmental Commission saw another proposal last night, although it depends on a long, narrow gravel driveway that I think is going to be a difficulty. But what do we need to do to get those who push a plan through the relevant board to actually do what they have proposed? Or is this totally out of our control, or is there anything that we can do to get things to happen?
Councilman, I think that's a good observation. I know what I generally observed is that 90% of development applications for industrial and even commercial office, 90% of those projects will usually be constructed within 2 years after receiving site plan approval. The other 10%, portion of that will happen after that 2-year period, and then some portion of that just never happens, never materializes. Now, why does development never go forward, whether in a timely fashion or at all? Probably has a lot to do with financing, right? Couldn't pull together the construction or permanent financing. The project sponsor doesn't have sufficient equity to put into the deal. Usually that's the issue, or it could be a market issue too, depending on where we are in the cycle. So there's a variety of reasons, and again, the only way to really know, and I'm not scoped to do this, would be to talk to all those folks who haven't gone forward to say, why didn't you go forward? But I think for the most part, you would find that probably 80 or 90% of that doesn't happen due to dollars. Yeah, I mean, if they've gone, let's put it this way, they've already spent a good chunk of change getting it through site plan approval. So it's not that they don't want to do it. No one wants to leave that kind of money on the table. I mean, if you've spent tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants and the time that it takes to get through the process, I don't think you can ascribe that, well, I lost interest. No, I think they lost, they don't have the money to carry it forward.
No.
Have you seen, and I know that this has happened at least on a few occasions, that those who own the land will take it through the process to make that land more valuable. Because if you have approvals in place, that land has more value in resale to another developer than it does as just raw land.
Absolutely. There are development entities that's all they do. We refer, there's 2 types of developers. They're horizontal and they're vertical. Vertical developers take it all the way through turning a key and walking in whatever building you're developing. The horizontal developers are strictly in to entitle it, add that value to it, and flip it to someone who's going to do the development, because that particular development entity is skilled at getting it entitled, but does not have the wherewithal nor the interest to bring it to development.
Well, just to switch topics, I think you've given us a lot of ideas about things like workforce housing, new restaurants. I hope that you can get down to the level of suggesting on which streets to do what. I mean, I know I was looking at the map there, not all of Elizabeth Avenue up to 287 is included specifically in the area of study, but I think of that as being contributory to the need that we have for development in this area. And perhaps that is the street for more increased retail development. Well, I think of it in part as there's probably more vacant land along the east side of Elizabeth Avenue than anywhere else in the immediate area. That may be something to look at. I'm glad to hear that we're doing the right things with Hamilton Street. I mean, what we did, staff's recommendation was to say that you can have 3- and 4-story mixed-use buildings there, and the market was ready to take advantage of that. And I hope that it goes on beyond the 3 buildings that we've had approved so far, which there's one property that has been sitting undeveloped for a very long time. There was a builder of affordable housing that went as far as making a developer's agreement with the township, and then they've never moved ahead. So that land is just sitting there. Again, you know, you can't always, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't always get them to drink. It might be the metaphor, but at least, and I've always said for many, many years that what Hamilton Street needs is more people walking the sidewalks and more people ready to shop, and then you'll get more shops.
Right.
And that's beginning to be what's happening.
Yep.
But I hope we'll get very specific recommendations for the corporate business area. And as I say, you know, paying attention also to at least the east side of Elizabeth Avenue. The M1, the west side of that is M1 zone, and that's where we have a lot of warehouse and flex type buildings.
Right.
And in fact, the problem is that there's so little space left undeveloped there that it's hard for more things to come in.
Right. And just to add on that, we also heard in our interviews that right now your light industrial area competes directly with Piscataway, right? And right now Piscataway is the preferred choice for light industrial users because of its access, on and off to the major arterials. It's easier, exactly. However, there are businesses that are still kicking the tires to get into Franklin. And so therein lies, okay, what can you do? There's certain things that you can't do. You can't change the roadway network that exists, right?
And that's one of our problems.
Right. But, okay, that's a challenge. But there are things that you can do, perhaps, that Piscataway's industrial area can't do. Again, kind of adding these amenities to the area for light industrial. Even adding training facilities where people that are going to work there, maybe there's a building that serves just as a place for training of, warehouse and light industrial workers to learn how to use machinery, CNC machines, or, that kind of thing. Anything that can be done to separate and distinguish your, corporate park is an advantage.
Thank you.
Can I add to
Parent-
that real quick? to what
Actually, okay, fine. Yes.
I wanted to piggyback on what you just said. What about the concept of an anchor of some sort in that area, like a sports and recreation center? You didn't touch on that at all.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think a sports and recreation center, a complex of sorts, and I know, as you probably know, I did speak to a couple gentlemen who have broached that concept, that idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. It would certainly create a destination for the corporate park. There's certainly enough land on which to do it. It would be a boost to the hotels, if it took off.
Would attract retail.
It would definitely attract retail, probably more along the lines of more eateries than like true retail. And if it were done right, it could be tied into a Rutgers and other, high schools and things of that nature where it's utilized, right? I mean, the business of sports continues to grow. Tournaments are crazy. They're just everywhere. Soccer tournaments, basketball tournaments, you name it. And indoor facilities, in particular, are in short supply. So, do I think it's a good idea? I do. I think there has to be more exploration for that. We do not have the scope or the budget to do that here. A recommendation is going to be that you do explore that concept in particular, because I think that is a home run type project if done right, and done right by people who know how to do it right and have the deep pockets to make it happen, right? Because it can't just be slapped up and right. And I know, here's the thing is, these types of facilities have been developed elsewhere around the country, and successfully so. There are also facilities that have not been successfully developed, and you're left with a shell of a building. So you want to make sure you do it right. But I agree, Councilwoman, that it is a very attractive opportunity.
Councilman Prasad wants a second turn at bat.
And me too after that.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, there was a transportation study that was done by Rutgers for us. And they talked about two loops with the town hall being the center of it. And that was because, we got all these senior communities with the aging seniors, they'll require transportation.
Right.
And of course, with the Ubers, that changes everything. So
Yeah.
part of what the Uber self-driving will actually change a lot of your parking requirements.
Exactly.
And, it's going to change the whole design of your shopping centers and everything else. Even parking requirements for residential complexes.
And hotels, too.
And hotels, too. So that's going to impact. So, would you take that into consideration in your recommendations?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what that ultimately means is that with the sea of asphalt that serves as parking in your corporate business district, we can now start to think in the new world of automated cars and Uber and all that, I don't know, at least a quarter of that asphalt is probably going to become obsolete in the next 5 years. And why is that important? And I talked earlier about incentives and incentivizing. That is an incentive. When we work on projects, and we work for developers as well, if a developer comes in and wants to build something and recognizes that the parking requirement that you have on the books is overkill for what it is I'm going to do and who is going to populate the building, if the town comes back and says, okay, we'll give you relief on that, you've just given them an incentive, because that's value. It's real dollars they're now spending on building parking, which, by the way, surface or structure, they're not making any money on. Remember, it's a loss. So, Councilman, to your point, the amount of surface parking that you have right now, a lot of it's just underutilized to begin with. That's, in my eyes, developable property. And we need to think about how do we cluster, strategic locations of underutilized parking as now a new development site.
Maybe some retail in there.
You like retail, don't you?
Councilwoman.
Yeah, just one concept that you spoke of, I couldn't visualize it as you were talking, and that was the millennials like to walk out of their business and walk to a Starbucks right there. If we're talking Davidson Avenue, I can get it.
Right.
But if we're talking some of the properties where we have empty warehouses or things like that, that doesn't work in that environment, does it? It's got to be in the
Where there's really-
heart of things, where things. I mean, we don't have a lot of places where things are going on.
Right.
So Davidson is the place where you'd be thinking in terms of that kind of development.
Probably, but you brought up this issue of millennials, and this is a hot topic no matter where you go in land use. We talked about where millennials work. Let me explain what's happening where millennials live and want to live. With the exception of 2010 or 2011, millennials live in suburbs and are continuing to stay and or move to suburbs. And I have to say, I was one of them who was like, oh yeah, the millennials are always going to cities. Well, research now shows unquestionably that millennials are moving to suburban areas that are urbanized.
These are not married millennials. These are
both.
both,
And more
okay.
particularly the ones who are married.
okay.
The ones who are married, in particular, who want to start a family, they're not staying in the city.
Yeah, they come back.
Relatively few of them are. However, they're not coming back to, places in Hunterdon County or even in Somerset County where it's traditional, almost rural in some cases, and really suburban, and there are no sidewalks. No. Where millennials are deciding to root are in first-ring suburban communities that have been urbanized. Sidewalks, storefronts, right? It's not a city, but it's got a town feel. I can walk outside and again, yes, get to the coffee house. So I guess what I'm saying is in reimagining the heart of, the business park, okay, whether it's, Cedar and Davidson and World's Fair and everything in between, somewhere in there, perhaps, and I know, Councilman, you mentioned this, can we think about a town center? Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it is a little bit of a town center, but maybe it's a concentration of development that gives that feel of urbanization, where if I am a millennial, that's attractive to me, and oh, by the way, my job is a bicycle ride away or, a nice walk away, even in inclement weather. I don't mind walking, right? They'll do it. So that's, I think that's an advantage that you have, particularly, again, in the shadow of Rutgers University and in the shadow of a job-rich region, that you can perhaps build housing for that particular demographic that's affordable, because that's the other thing too, is, this whole notion about why millennials haven't left the house. They can't afford to leave the house, right? But build housing that's affordable, which means it's probably a little bit more dense, how many housing units per acre, and offers the amenities that they want. You'll fill it. And again, retail follows rooftops. Retail will come in thereafter. Businesses follow where the talent is, and there you go. 25 years.
25 years. You keep mentioning Rutgers. Doesn't Princeton play a part? I mean, we've got Princeton at one end and Rutgers at the other. Of course, the dense part of Franklin is closer to
Yes.
New Brunswick, but
Yeah.
how far is Princeton?
I mean, in
Half
terms
hour.
of Princeton students,
Impact on us. It doesn't.
Rutgers, what are we talking like in the general vicinity? 30,000, 35,000, 40,000, right? Princeton, it's not growing. It's 8,000 kids, maybe. So, and it's far enough away where your influence doesn't matter, or their influence doesn't matter to you. It's far enough away.
It doesn't have the vibrancy of a Rutgers, that's for sure.
It doesn't.
But it certainly has.
Or think about it this way: the kids at Rutgers are going to be at least more familiar with this area, and want to be close to know that, hey, I can get back to a Rutgers game. I can get back into downtown George Street. Versus kids in Princeton, they know Nassau Street in Princeton, and they know that neck of the woods.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Vornlocker, have you any comments?
I thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, I want to go back to transportation and transit and ask you to look at that and as you work your way through the close of this project and look at the demand for transit from whatever it is that we pursue in the corporate business area and the influence that the age-restricted developments have on that need for transit as well. There are several thousand housing units occupied by one or two people who are now aging in place and will have that need. And I know that in other communities in New Jersey that develop those types of residential communities long before we did, those towns came to have a need for community transportation and now provide it. Towns like Toms River and Monroe, that now the municipality provides a form of transportation that's much more like, I don't say New Jersey Transit, but a jitney service or shuttle buses or what have you that run regular routes through those communities. And they border our corporate business zone. And I think that demand for transit can probably be met now or in the very near future without the residential development of the corporate business zone. But that would then that really add to it. So I'd ask that you look at that population.
How long ago was the Rutgers study done?
That's probably 7 years ago now, so it's old and it's outdated, and it really doesn't take into account any of this. It started to take into account the Canal Walk, Somerset Run, Renaissance development, but it really is outdated, and we might need to look to do that again and not even update it, but really start from scratch because everything has changed,
right.
And there's been a dramatic change. But really, in this study, all I'd ask is that you look at that as with the potential need for transit, that be incorporated in the need, so that we could make a better judgment.
Yep, can do that.
Mr. Dominic or Mr. Healy, do you have anything you want to add? At the mic, please.
Just a real quick things, and Vince and I, of course, will meet with Todd and go over some other things that we have. But certainly the parking regulations, that's one thing that kind of popped up. I know Ted could, I'm sure, speak to the fact that over the years we have been lowering our parking requirements for, I think, twice over the last few years for retail, actually, and as well the industrial and warehouse. But there might be some opportunity to lower that even more. And over the years, both boards have granted waivers when the applicants have demonstrated for that exact reason. But we can look at that and that's kind of some of the regulatory incentives that Mr. Poole just spoke of. So we certainly can look at that. As far as the home occupation, I think it does. I think we can also look at that to tweak that. I think it does allow for some of the home businesses, entrepreneurs working out of their house, maybe one employee kind of thing, not having customers come to the site, but build their a business from home. We might want to tweak it a little bit to allow for that. And then the last thing is just the general idea of creating a place. In my mind, in the last discussion we just had, in my mind, I think Hamilton Street has the most potential for creating a place in Franklin. I don't know if we necessarily want to go too far down the road of trying to create one where it doesn't necessarily exist off of Elizabeth. I think millennials and people who are looking to go somewhere of interest, it's Hamilton Street, it's the access to New Brunswick, it's the stuff that's going on in Somerville and all the restaurants and things there. I think we have a lot of this whole exercise is opportunities and what we can grab onto, and as opposed to you had just mentioned some of the towns out in like Hunterdon where it's a bunch of 6,000 square foot homes on 6-acre lots, and the next generation is not necessarily looking for that, but Franklin has access to some transit, access to 287, proximity to Somerville, New Brunswick, nearby train stations to get to New York. A wide variety of housing choices at a wide range of housing prices. All of these things are things that we can build on. So I just wanted to express that, and again, I think we need to, as we move forward, concentrate to a large degree on, our to capture the opportunities that we have.
So are you saying you're going to advocate me being able to subdivide my 5-acre lot in the canal
No.
zone? No, I'm only kidding.
Absolutely
Don't
not.
even respond, I'm only kidding.
You know, I knew you were going to ask a question like that, so that's what.
Go ahead.
The one thing I will say is that, and Todd touched upon it, economic development is slow. We got really lucky on Hamilton Street. We didn't have to do all the scientific stuff because we knew what was happening in Hamilton. We got really lucky. The market changed. Rutgers and New Brunswick is kind of getting crowded. The real estate values, we changed the zoning, so everything kind of came together. What I point out to is 15, 17 years ago, we had, when I was working in Pennsylvania as the economic development director for Northampton County, Bethlehem Steel went under. 15 years ago, and just now with sands and everything else, it's exploding. That's 15 years, and that's because $100 million was put into that. We spent millions of dollars on planning, $100 million between the county, the fed, and the state, and it's 15 years later. So this is the beginning. The council's made a great commitment to move forward, but you have to understand this is the beginning with putting the plans into place, deciding what you want to do, and slowly it creeps. And then you hope that something incredible happens, like we get the recreation that, poof, that comes and everything explodes. And the reason that happens is because the council takes the initiative to hire someone like Todd. And let me also explain to you is that hopefully when Todd does this and does the next report, you understand that we're going to need him or someone like him to continue to assist us with that professional type of knowledge as we look at things, to ask him to do that. Hamilton, we got lucky. We did. But we're going to need someone like him to help us move forward.
Thank you. Councilman Francois, you have.
I just wanted to comment on something the executive director of the redevelopment agency said, and also our planning director, Mark Healy. I think we kind of took on the millennium concept with the redevelopment area, with some of the housing stock that we're trying to put in that area. Would you not agree with that? So we're making certain strides as far as trying to tap into that market. That's a prime area over there for millennials.
Right.
The redevelopment area around
the
Hamilton
Renaissance
Street.
2000?
Yes, Renaissance 2000
So
area.
I'll
Yes.
relate this story. I was a relatively newly minted economic development professional
Back
in
then,
New Brunswick
yes.
back in the 90s.
I remember you.
When I was working with Buster Soares, opposite, working on that.
Mm-hmm.
Look how long that took.
Right.
And there are many hiccups before that.
1990s, yes.
Right. So there you go. There's yet another example of how long these things take, and that eventually, when you stick with it and the market's there, it happens, but it's not a quick fix.
But New Brunswick did it a little bit faster than we did.
Yeah. Well, yeah, their side of it. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
I still think you're relatively young. So now for my comments. I mean, we're all saying it's luck. I think it was more than luck. I don't think it was quite serendipity. It was these two gentlemen here seeing the market forces and being exposed to the developers coming in and giving them that idea. So yes, we were fortunate that the economy came back when it did, but the economy will come back hopefully always, and you planned that right. I will also comment that 25 years looking forward is a lot longer than 25 years looking back. So at 25 years from now, whoever's sitting up here will look back, hopefully, and say, thank God they did this, and that was just a short time ago. Mr. Healy thankfully stole my thunder as far as the amenities on the Davidson Elizabeth Avenue. I do think Hamilton, and I may be wrong on this, I do think Hamilton, that's happening there. What would you think of turning Davidson entirely, or not entirely, but trying to point that more towards a warehousing flex and not try to make it Hamilton Street, or not have it even, and I know that the talk until now has been the multi-use, but maybe not multi-use, maybe warehousing. I think Ms. Sherman misspoke when she said we have empty warehouses. I don't think we have empty warehouses. We have empty office buildings.
In the, yes,
Right, but-
the area where there were warehouses or there, you
Right.
know,
Absolutely.
campus and.
But warehouses are really popular now. So I just want you to comment on what if the Davidson area became a warehousing park?
Yes, I think it makes sense. Demand for warehousing is only going to increase in this day and age of same-day delivery, with the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world trying to, one-up each other on how quickly they can get it. That, the ability to do same-day delivery or even just next-day delivery depends in large part on smaller warehouse and distribution facilities, not mega facilities, because there's still one more stop to deliver, So yes to that. And probably along Davidson, given what's there, it's probably an easier lift to try and convert that to mostly, if not all, light industrial, as opposed to try and start from scratch and add other things.
And that doesn't mean not doing the sports park or sports complex thing there too. That could fit in there. Well, you're not, but to make Davidson Avenue look like Hamilton Street or downtown Somerville or something, that's a
tall order.
That's a very big bulldozer and a lot of hammers
Yeah.
to do that. The other idea about the making it a medical area, medicine's about to make a big change or not. And we can have a long political discussion about that.
Right.
So do you think, regardless of what happens, we're just outshadowed by the aging population, the aging baby boomers, and the need for medicine, so that the demand side will be there regardless of what the supply side works its way out to?
Oh, yeah. The demand, let's put it this way, the demand for ambulatory facilities was happening before Obamacare happened. It was accelerated because of Obamacare, because, that's all about pushing medicine out of a centralized location into communities. Now, I don't necessarily think that's going to change. It just, how people are insured to pay for their care may change. But the facilities themselves, let's put it this way. When I worked on Hunterdon County's economic development strategies a few years ago, one of the interviewees was the I think he was, if he wasn't the chief executive, he was the chief operating officer for Hunterdon Medical Center. So the entire, and he told me, he said, look, this was going to happen regardless of the Affordable Care Act. And their whole model is, and it's a financial model based on delivery systems into the community. So they're buying up medical practices left and right, which require real estate to place those medical practices. And there's a consolidation of where it's happening. I would say for Davidson Avenue, it's not a question of do we have, all these medical facilities dotting or any, that you pick a strategic location where you can have a campus type environment.
Yep.
That again is also located next to amenities, because here's the thing is medical offices are like grocery stores, foot traffic, right? People got to go there, and what you see hundreds of people coming and going every day. What retailer doesn't want to be next to that? What luncheonette, restaurant, right? So in that regard, you want that, it acts as an anchor for other businesses. We want to strategically, where is that located? Where can we incentivize medical office space to cluster such that it benefits retail or where we want retail to be? And then the rest of Davidson, absolutely. I think it's a better distribution warehousing type play than anything else. It's got the nice wide boulevard, I wouldn't mess with that.
Okay, very good. And then the whole thing about the millennials, I think we're always a little bit risky when we predict what millennials will do, because they will do what they want to do.
Exactly.
And as you pointed out, a couple of years ago, they were all moving to the city. Now they're not. And one thing I'll predict is when the millennials get older, they don't want to walk half a mile in inclement weather.
Right.
I used to not care.
Right.
Now I actually have a raincoat
Right. No,
and an umbrella. So,
I agree.
all right, anyone else have any, go ahead.
I want to make one more comment. So we didn't need an economic development study to tell us that we don't have enough restaurants in Franklin Township.
No, you did not. You did not.
That's a big complaint for everybody. I know every time I want to go somewhere and eat, I think, oh, let me go to Piscataway, let me go to New Brunswick. There's not too many places here for us to eat. So that's an area that we're going to need your assistance with as well.
Right, and I'll say this. One of the reasons why restaurants are one of the hardest businesses to maintain, and they go under quite often, restaurants that are out and about by themselves, they better be really good or based on quick turn, like a breakfast place, right? Because everything in between never survives. The restaurants that survive are generally located in urban areas because they're clustered, and they're clustered with a lot of people. So I guess the point that I'm making is that if we're going to have more restaurants in Franklin, we need to say where should they be clustered such that they can support each other. Because think about it, when people go out, all things being equal, I'm going to choose the place where I've got a selection of restaurants. I might not know where I'm ending up that night, but I know if I'm ending up in a place where I got 4 or 5 choices, I'll make a choice. I'd rather, if I'm going to go to the restaurant that's somewhere out in the boonies, I know I'm going there for something specific. But how often is that the case versus, hey, you know what? Let's go to downtown New Brunswick because I got a pretty wide selection, and we'll figure it out when we're there. Right? We need to make it so that people can figure it out when they're in Franklin.
And I like pizza and Chinese food a lot. I really do. But we don't need any more.
Okay, fair enough.
We have at least 5 Indian restaurants down Route 27. Or just on our side, then there's more on the other side.
All right, I'm getting hungry. All right, I think it's time we move on. Councilwoman Sherman wisely asked that the public session be after you spoke, so the public could hear this and then perhaps have questions. So we're gonna, in special meetings, we generally hold it to 2 minutes. I think maybe we want to give a little more time to that, so let's make it 3 minutes unless council objects. And I know some people are here for other than the economic development comments. I'm just suggesting that perhaps we put the economic development questions first, and then, but anyone can come up at any time to speak on any matter pertaining to government. So do I have a motion to open for public discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. We are now open for public discussion. 3 minutes, may only come up once. And I might, if there's a great discussion going on, extend it just slightly, because this is a special meeting. Yes, state your name and address,
All right,
please.
Benjamin Guy, 35 Paddock Drive. Appreciate the opportunity for this gentleman to present himself. I have some specific questions that I actually want to do. One is definition of wealth belt that we actually define here, because we're talking about specific demographic as far as numbers are concerned to actually support businesses. I would like to look at that and actually define that out in the next time he does a study, because the trends on exactly where people are actually living, moving, and actually the money that they're spending, I would actually like to look at that a little bit more, and actually how that would actually impact the next generation, meaning like the 25 to 34, where they're actually spending the money to actually substantiate businesses that you actually might be looking to recruit at all. So I would like to look at that to define that out a little bit more. Second thing is, if you're working on this economic plan, is it actually going to be open to the public itself to actually look at all together?
What's that?
The whole plan.
There'll be another presentation. This plan will be presented. This is a work session,
Yeah, I
more or
mean,
less. So the plan will be presented.
The whole entire scope of what the report comes out to be.
Plan's a
It'll be a
public
public
document.
hearing.
Absolutely.
All right, just want to make sure. The second thing is recommendations for for Chamber of Commerce or anything else that needs to come in the area to actually help with the recruitment, because this gentleman can only do but so much. The business community has to step up, period, point blank. And it needs to be actually organized a little bit more. And I know that we don't get as much support as I'd say Somerset County as far as what they do, and I think we need to actually look at how we actually look at a plan to action to actually support what he's doing. If he can only get a result of 52 businesses or 52 responses, there's a major problem. And like I said, it's not his problem. It's really a major problem on our own as far as that's concerned. I don't care what his study is, but again, for people that have come up here and complain all the time and not say and not be a part of his study, it's a problem. Like I said, I know that he might have got a minor result of maybe 450 people to actually dig from. Again, that resulting is only 10%. That's bad. Like I said, I don't know what that is. Like I said, again, as far as resulting, whether or not the juice tank or anybody else that's in this area that actually that he might not have got the emails from needs to be a little bit more supportive. And like I said, if the Franklin Chamber of Commerce can actually get up their database and actually work with him a little bit more to actually recruit out and get that information, it'll be something to actually look at all. As far as social services and actual healthcare stuff that he actually pointed out for job recruitment, again, that's been a major component that I've actually been talking to the town about a little bit more to say, hey, look, we need to bring back more social service activities. Because he said that specifically, I think that's one of the assessments that we actually need to look at, and we need to have a bigger conversation with the freeholders and everybody else to actually see exactly how they support that. The last point that I actually want to make is that from the transportation-wise, transportation as a whole, we spend money, and freeholders stated this themselves, is that they spend money on a transportation loop. They actually support something that we do. We need to reassess what that looks like. They spend county dollars to actually support something for Franklin. We need to reassess what they're spending money on and ask them to actually reassess exactly what they're doing with that money, because it was obsolete. It's about 10, 15 years old exactly when they actually put that agreement in there. And when I went up there to talk to the freeholders themselves, they said they actually put out this money, and that's one of the largest stipends that they actually pay out to Franklin Township as far as the bill is concerned. So if it's not working, we need to reassess what it's doing. And that's one of the things that, again, from a county support initiative, we need to actually look at. So that is my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you want to respond to that immediately, you can. I would just like to make the comment, that kind of a return on a survey is actually really fantastic numbers. It's very hard to get surveys. Often surveys have 2-3% responses.
I would only add, Mayor, that yes, the 10% is probably a good response. I mean, there are surveys that only return 4 or 5%. Secondly, it's not a scientific survey. Scientific would have been we would have gotten a random sample, which would have been reflective of the population of businesses. The problem is that in order to get a good-sized random sample, we would need 400 businesses to have responded, and they're just not enough. Obviously, there's only 100 more businesses than that in the entire Franklin Township. So we got 10%. I will say this: a recommendation is that on an annual, if not a semi-annual basis, that you do a survey. These surveys, or the survey that we just did with SurveyMonkey, is inexpensive. And once you have a list of people that are participating, to be able to come back to them and ask them follow-up questions is very important and can help strengthen your strategy.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just address one other issue that Mr. Guy raised.
Yes,
as far as the transportation, and Mr. Guy, I think what you're talking about is the transportation that's currently provided by Somerset County here in Franklin Township, and that's primarily the dash shuttle routes that run between New Brunswick and the Davidson Avenue corridor and Bound Brook and the Davidson Avenue corridor from the 2 train stations. For what is the current need on Davidson Avenue, those are very successful and well utilized. The issue that I raised earlier, and I think that Councilman Prasad raised, is what is the future need and where do we need to go with transportation, and how do we address those transit needs as the area is redeveloped, and also as we incorporate the age-restricted developments that surround the Davidson Avenue corridor. Those, and not it's not often that I defend Somerset County, and I'm defending Somerset County here. Those particular shuttles, and I have been involved in various surveys that relate to those shuttles on a number of occasions now in the course of my career, are well utilized by the employees who are staffing the hotels and businesses in the Davidson Avenue area. The shuttle buses are full, so they do meet a need. It's just what will the need be in the future? I don't believe it will be the same need that we currently are meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else on economic development? Anyone else on anything?
Good evening. My name is Manijeh Sabar, 146 Emerson Road. I thought, I haven't been here for a long time, but I intend to come back more often now. Having what has happened to us, almost like a coup d'etat. But so I didn't expect this. I'm so happy to hear that there is a discussion about development and there is consultancy, and I really enjoyed this and bonus for me. I think that I like the idea of having town center. It's very important. It's not only millennial, but we have a lot of older people in this community that they would enjoy that and they wouldn't move to other places because there is no place for them to walk around and enjoy what they have. In addition to sport, which I support, but not competitive sport, but sports that people, do a lot of activities, but also entertainment. We have some form of entertainment, special type of movie theater that brings good movies that this community would appreciate. Would be good. Also, I think what happened today with DeVos getting approved, being given approval in the Senate, so becoming our Secretary of Education. And I don't know what would happen to the township and how we are going to address the issue of education and schooling, because also it was talked here that we need to have educated young people who can stay around and use and be hired in this area as well. I don't know how it's going to impact it and what people are talking about it. There is a lot to talk about at what is happening, and I've thought about, but the major thing that I came for tonight to talk about sanctuary for the township, to become sanctuary. We are entering a very, as far as I'm concerned, very difficult and dark time, and we need to think about our community and the people who are here and the people who may come. And also we know, since we are talking about development, I don't know how, I don't remember the numbers, but a couple of days ago I read that most of the immigrants who come to the country, they have about 2 or 3 times more starting businesses than people who have been living here. They get into businesses, and so they are always a plus for every community that they get in. So I would like to propose that. I would like, we would bring some resolution about creating sanctuary here, and maybe discussion and for getting Franklin Township to be sanctuary, for us to protect people that we have or people that they may come. We know a bunch of towns have started this, and we need to be in the forefront of this, because we are a very diverse community anyway, as it is now. And we need to protect people. I'm sure we have a lot of people who are undocumented around and are hiding and are scared. And also, so. Thank you. And also, I wanted to propose another thing. It's coming to Persian New Year, and since Iran is one of the top number of 7 countries under being sanctioned more and more, more than past 39 years, is that I would like to propose, maybe talk to Mr. Prasad about having a Persian New Year celebration.
Okay. I'll ask you to talk to him about that offline. Your time is
Yes.
up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, though, for your comments. Great. Ms. Paul?
Hello, Linda Powell, 22 Buffer Drive. I wanted to echo some of what Manager said. I didn't hear everything because my hearing's on one of those aging baby boomers. But I think this council did take the stand-up pledge, and I was here that night. I took it too, and I think that we have to really put our action where our words are and where our hearts are, and do something a little bit more concrete about sanctuary. I was told that I don't know what's happening tonight, but not following the executive order is not illegal. And I know our lawyer isn't here, but other people in law enforcement may know about that. So in terms of protecting our citizens, I think we can take more action on that part. The only other thing, I don't know if Manager knows this, but there's a meeting at the high school on Thursday. I think it starts at 7, about to give a panel discussion about charter schools. And on the 27th, hopefully this will be on the website, we're having an action alert, an update on the forum about the proposed compressor station 206 and the whole Northeast supply enhancement project. And a lot of environmental groups will be there. That will be at 7 o'clock at SGS School on 1649 Amwell Road. So I hope to see some of you there.
That's on the 23rd of February?
Oh,
What
no,
day?
did I say 23rd?
No, I'm asking.
It's
what day?
27th. It's a Monday night.
Oh, okay.
So there won't be a council meeting that night.
But we will have a FOC meeting that night.
Do we? Okay.
Yeah, we might have to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Paul, you also may be interested, since we had the discussion at Advisory Board of Health, the beginning of the council meeting a week from tonight will actually be, it'll start at 7. It will actually be a very short Board of Health meeting to, let's say, consider the resolution, the same resolution that was passed by council about the compressor station. Council members happen to be the Board of Health also, and it wouldn't hurt for the council to pass, the Board of Health to pass a similar resolution. So there will actually be 2 meetings that night. Hopefully the first one will be brief, and then we will get on to the rest of the council meetings. Anyone else from the public? Yes, great.
Good evening, Bernadette Marr, 4 Norris Road, Somerset, New Jersey. I'm happy to hear that Franklin is doing a job to plan for our future. Let's keep in mind to make that a sustainable future. As most people are aware, we're currently facing a compressor station, a gas compressor station being built here in Franklin Township, and that's one of the things that we have to look at as we try to attract business to our communities, is that they're sustainable businesses and they will truly long-term be good for our economy and good for the future of our families. Secondly, I would hope that maybe we would consider Franklin Township becoming a sanctuary township. Some of our neighbors are currently looking into that aspect, which is New Brunswick and Highland Park. I believe the ACLU was perhaps drafting some wording for townships and cities that are interested. And also I'd like to invite everyone again to our forum on February 27th. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing? I see no one else wishing to speak. I cannot make a motion. I am the.
Seeing nobody
There we go.
coming forward, my motion to close the public section.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of closing public session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public session is closed. I would speak extremely briefly on sanctuary cities. It is near and dear to my heart, but it is something we must move very carefully, very deliberately. We do not want to unintentionally hurt the people that we are trying to protect. And that's all I'll say on the matter. We don't have formal council discussion items, but if anyone has brief comments,
Yeah,
certainly.
I too, that's a subject that's near and dear to my heart as well. And I think if we can move forward with that, we need to do that. Absolutely. To protect our citizens and our residents that live here in Franklin, which we have a very diverse population that affects.
I certainly feel the same way, but I have no idea what it means to be a sanctuary city. I need a lot more information. I need to understand what that means, and I never thought that if you do it, you can hurt the people you're trying to help. So there's a lot more I need to learn about this. So, but you have people here who care. It just is an issue that's been to other towns, not us. We'll look into it.
I would say ditto to everything that was said,
And stop there.
we'll stop there.
Mr. Chase, have you anything
What
else?
he said.
Have you any comment on anything pertaining to government? You win. Well then, if anyone wants to make a motion to get out of here?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Be well, Franklin.